Hey, what's up? Welcome back to your channel name. This time, we're going to dive into a story that will make you think twice before walking alone at night. Grab some snacks, turn off the lights, and listen closely. Nathan Hargrove wasn't someone who scared easily. He had spent most of his life trekking through some of the harshest wilderness in Australia. From deep canyons to unmarked trails, he had camped under the stars more times than he could remember. But this time was different. This time, he chose a place that had barely been mentioned outside of hushed conversations, Half Moon Lake. He first heard the name from an uncle who was drunk and rambling, years ago. It wasn't even marked on most digital maps. But the way the old man had spoken of it, slurred and trembling, left a strange impression on Nathan. He looked it up, found vague directions on a decades-old blog, and decided to go. To him, the more unknown a place was, the better. With him was Jared Milner, not quite the outdoors type, but someone who desperately needed an escape from the suffocating monotony of office life. Jared didn't really believe in ghosts or legends. He saw this as a fishing trip, a camping break, and a chance to shut off his phone for a few days. But Half Moon wasn't just a quiet lake. It was too quiet. The air around it felt still, unnatural. By late afternoon, they had set up their tent by the eastern bank, far from any other campers or trails. The lake surface was perfectly still, reflecting the soft golden sky like a sheet of polished stone. And yet, there was no sound. No insects, no birds. Just the whisper of wind through dead leaves. Nathan noticed it first, the feeling of being watched. Jared, too busy assembling his rod, brushed it off. He even joked about cursed fish. Neither of them knew that from the moment they stepped on that damp soil, something beneath the water had stirred awake. Something that had been quiet for a very long time. Nathan always preferred isolation. If a spot was crowded, he wouldn't bother. That's why he chose the far eastern edge of Half Moon, a place that couldn't be accessed by regular paths. You had to know where to look, follow overgrown trails, and trust that your tires could handle rough terrain. It was perfect. He remembered a strange piece of advice from a local he once met: East Half Moon doesn't give back your reflection. It sounded like nonsense, something out of an old poem. But it stuck with him. The campsite itself was hauntingly beautiful. Two twisted gum trees arched over the clearing like old guardians. Rocks jutted out of the earth like forgotten ruins. The lake shimmered, but its stillness was unnatural. It wasn't calm, it was waiting. Jared didn't notice the unease. He was focused on his gear, eager to cast the first line. He even joked that with no people around, the fish wouldn't know what bait was. He expected the trip to be one long stretch of reeling and cooking fish over fire. But after hours of waiting, nothing. The water didn't ripple. Not even a tug. No insects hovered over the surface. No bird swooped in for a drink. It was as if life simply avoided this place. The silence deepened, stretching thin over them. Even their own voices seemed to echo in a strange way, as if being listened to by something just out of sight. Nathan kept glancing at the water. The reflection looked wrong, not in shape, but in feel. The light bent strangely. Jared just laughed, cracked open a beer, and claimed this would make for an epic travel story. Nathan wasn't sure what story they were stepping into. The last stop before heading into the wilderness was a tiny, half-forgotten village called Red Pine. Just a few weather-beaten homes, a mechanic's shed, and one store called Monroe Supplies. It felt like stepping into the past. Even the air smelled like old wood and gasoline. They went in for the basics: water, gas canisters, bait. But from the moment they parked their truck, they felt the stares. An old man on the porch stopped smoking and stared at them without blinking. A child dropped his marbles and ran inside his house. Inside the shop, the woman behind the counter barely spoke. She scanned their items quickly and avoided eye contact. When Nathan mentioned Half Moon Lake, her face tensed. She didn't reply. Just packed the rest of their items in silence, sliding the bag across the counter with shaking hands. Jared found it hilarious, whispering about secret cults and inbred villagers. Nathan wasn't laughing. On the way out, he noticed an old bulletin board by the door. Yellowed and cracked, one photo stood out, a black and white portrait of a young man wearing a wide-brim hat. Missing since 1947. Thomas E. Dyer. Last seen near Half Moon Lake. Nathan's heart skipped. Something about the photo, the man's eyes, perhaps, seemed eerily familiar. But he couldn't place it. Just a face from long ago, left behind like the rest of this place. Near the edge of the village sat a peeling blue house, its fence sagging, the front yard barren and scorched. An elderly woman sat on the porch in a wooden chair, her gaze sharp as a hawk's. She watched them as they passed, then motioned for them to come closer. She introduced herself as Mrs. Elspeth Monroe. Her skin was lined with time, but her voice was clear, unervingly so. She handed Nathan a cloth pouch, tied with string. Inside was coarse salt, and a long strand of hair. Jared scoffed, called it some kind of voodoo survival kit, and refused to touch it. But Elspeth leaned forward and gave them one last warning. Never fish when the lake reflects the sky in full. Never respond if the lake calls your name. Nathan kept the pouch. He couldn't explain why, but something about her eyes told him she wasn't crazy. Not entirely. He also noticed the effigy in her yard, a small wooden pole with a straw doll hanging from it, facing the direction of the lake. It wasn't fear that kept her house watching Half Moon. It was habit. Ritual. Back on the road, Jared wouldn't stop mocking the old woman's advice. He cracked jokes about evil catfish, cursed bait, and lake monsters that whispered your name at night. Nathan said nothing. That evening, as the sun began to sink behind the trees, they took their gear and sat by the water. The temperature dropped slightly, but the air felt thick. Their reflections stretched long across the lake. Then, nothing. No fish. No sound. Just the echo of their breath and the weight of time standing still. Jared, undeterred, popped open a beer and toasted to the ghosts of Half Moon. He dipped his hand into the water, pulled it back quickly. It felt strangely warm, like bath water. Nathan's watch stopped. The wind stopped. Even the trees were still. And then, the last sliver of sun disappeared, and the world fell completely silent. The sun had long dipped behind the trees, leaving the lake bathed in a cold, pale blue light. The surface was still smooth, but now had a strange sheen to it, almost like glass pulled over something breathing beneath. Jared, despite all odds, finally got a bite. At first, he thought it was just a snag, maybe a sunken log or old debris. But when the line pulled again, hard, with weight, his adrenaline spiked. He stood up, digging his heels into the soil, grinning like a man who just landed a trophy. Nathan watched, but something about the water felt wrong. It wasn't the splash or the way the rod bent. It was the silence, unnatural and absolute. Not even the sound of the line cutting through water. Just the windless void between them. Jared pulled and pulled, the reel screeching. But whatever was on the line didn't struggle like a fish. It didn't jerk or dive. It simply sank, then pulled again, straight downward. Like it was anchoring him. Like it wanted him to come closer. Then, something broke the surface, not a fish, not anything that belonged in a lake. A pale shape, slow and silent, drifted just below the surface. Not a body. Not quite. It had the form of a woman, but stretched wrong. Long limbs, too thin, too fluid. Hair floated like kelp, face turned downward. The thing didn't thrash, it hovered. Watching without eyes. Jared gasped, letting go of the rod. It slipped into the water with a soft plunk and disappeared instantly, as if swallowed. The line snapped back once, sharply, and vanished beneath the surface like it had never been there. Nathan stood frozen. He didn't see it clearly, but he saw enough. Something wasn't just in the lake. Something lived in it. In that moment after the rod vanished, the water rippled, not from wind, not from movement above. It rippled like something underneath had exhaled. A long, slow breath from the depths. Nathan's skin prickled with cold that had nothing to do with the night air. As he stepped closer, he saw her. A pale figure, drifting just beneath the surface. Her hair spread out like ink in water, eyes shut, face angled upward now, and her mouth was slightly open, as if whispering. But no sound came. Her body was suspended in the water, not moving, not floating. It didn't follow any rule of gravity or current. It hovered. Nathan blinked, and she was gone. Jared was already backing away, his bravado gone. He laughed nervously, muttering something about lake gases, hallucinations, or maybe just shadows playing tricks. But Nathan knew better. There was no shadow play in those eyes, that wasn't a hallucination. It was watching them. Still watching them. The worst part wasn't seeing her. It was how she didn't break the surface. She wanted to be seen, but only enough to make them curious. Only enough to make them stay. Later that night, as the fire flickered and their nerves settled into a slow burn, the stillness returned. Nathan tried to read a book while Jared scrolled through photos on his phone. But the air had changed. It wasn't just cold anymore. It felt dense, heavy, like breathing through cloth. Then the sound started. Not loud, not even clear. Just faint echoes, like murmurs passed from underwater caverns. The kind of sound that doesn't break the surface but finds a way into your ears anyway. Gurgled syllables, wet consonants, a language that didn't belong to any living throat. Jared thought it was wind. Nathan thought otherwise. The lake no longer looked like a lake. In the dark, it appeared endless. Like the void had spread from the water and now pooled all around them. The whispers didn't come in intervals. They came like breath, slow, steady, rhythmical. Nathan stood and turned toward the water, and for a second, he thought he saw a face. Not in the water, above it. Hovering, faintly illuminated by moonlight. But when he blinked, it was gone. Jared didn't hear the whispers the same way. To him, it was laughter. A woman's voice, soft and sweet, calling from the far bank. He smiled. Nathan did not. Jared sat at the edge of the tent, staring out across the lake like he was entranced. His expression had changed. He was too still. Too calm. His fingers were pale, clenched around a half-empty bottle, and he hadn't blinked in minutes. He told Nathan the voice had called his name, gently, like a lover's whisper. He said it was beautiful, familiar. He even thought it sounded like someone he once knew. A girl from his past. Or maybe a dream. Nathan watched him closely. Jared's pupils looked dilated. His voice had taken on a strange tone, not frightened, but hopeful. As if he wanted to go toward it. Nathan grabbed his arm and pulled him back into the light. Jared resisted, weakly, then laughed it off, saying maybe he was just tired. But Nathan saw something dark trailing from the back of his neck, like water droplets, but thicker. Sticky. Black. Nathan checked the tent zippers and threw more wood on the fire. Whatever was calling Jared, it knew his name. And it knew how to make him listen. The fire was almost out when Nathan woke to the sound of rustling leaves. Not the wind. Steps. Slow, deliberate, close. He sat up, ears straining. Jared was asleep, breathing shallowly. The night was too quiet. Nathan stepped outside and circled the tent with a flashlight. That's when he saw them. Footprints. Bare. Human. They circled the tent once, then led toward the lake. But the earth was dry. And the prints, they were wet. Each step shimmered faintly under the beam of light, like water had been poured from a foot, but the lake was 20 meters away. And the steps were heading back into the tent area. As he turned to follow them, he caught a scent, briny, sweet, and rotting, like decaying flowers mixed with salt. It hit him in a wave of nausea. He shined the light on the final footprint. It wasn't shaped like a foot anymore. It was something longer. Bonier. Almost like the outline of a hand. Reaching upward from the earth. Nathan had barely fallen asleep when the dream came. But it didn't unfold like the usual haze of images and nonsense. It felt real. He was submerged, deep below the lake's surface, surrounded by nothing but green darkness. The pressure in his ears was unbearable. His limbs were heavy, like something was holding him in place. He couldn't see the bottom. He couldn't see the surface. Only a woman, drifting toward him from above. Her arms stretched outward, not in menace, but invitation. Her face, lifeless, swollen, yet somehow aware. Her hair swirled around her like ink in water. Her dress was torn, floating around her body like she'd been underwater for years. He tried to scream, but his mouth filled with water. He couldn't move. Couldn't even thrash. It was as if the lake itself had claimed his body. And the woman, she didn't attack. She simply touched his chest with her fingers, cold and soft like fish belly. That was the moment he woke up, choking on air, his chest soaked in sweat. But the wetness wasn't just sweat. His blanket was damp. And there was a small puddle on the ground beside his sleeping bag. The dream hadn't ended. It had followed him back. At dawn, the first thing Nathan noticed was the silence. Birds usually chirped by then, insects buzzed, something alive moved around. But this morning felt sealed in glass. Jared was nowhere to be seen. His sleeping bag was still half-zipped. His backpack untouched. His shoes, still placed neatly by the fire, as if he had walked barefoot into the forest or, worse, to the lake. Nathan searched the perimeter. Called his name, nothing. Not even an echo. Not even the distant cracking of twigs. Just the suffocating hum of stillness. What chilled Nathan wasn't just Jared's absence. It was the calmness of the scene. There were no signs of a struggle, no hurried footprints, no dropped flashlight. Just, stillness. As if Jared had stood up in the middle of the night, answered a call only he could hear, and walked out of the world. Nathan looked toward the lake. Something shimmered just below the surface, barely a ripple. A suggestion of movement. And then, again, that smell, briny rot and dead flowers. Nathan ran to the lake, heart pounding, desperate for any clue. That's when he saw it, a faint glint of metal bobbing near the water's edge. He stepped in, soaking his feet, and reached for it. Jared's phone. Still warm. Still on. Still recording. The timer showed it had been recording for nearly 2 hours. Nathan's thumb hovered before he tapped play. At first, nothing but static. Then, Jared's voice. Calm, hushed, like he was talking to someone Nathan couldn't hear. The tone was eerily affectionate, like he was trying to soothe a frightened child. Then, whispers. Wet, gurgling whispers, overlaid beneath Jared's voice. They didn't come from him. They didn't even sound human. Some syllables were backward. Others echoed as if underwater. The final moment of the recording was silence. Then Jared's whisper, barely audible. She's waiting. Followed by a splash. And then the recorder stopped. Nathan didn't return to the water. He stuffed Jared's phone into his bag and zipped the tent shut, heart hammering, mind spinning. But when he turned around to sit and think, he saw something that made him freeze. There were markings on the inside fabric of the tent. At first, they looked like water stains. But the shapes were too intentional, curved lines, intersecting symbols, like ancient letters drawn with fingertips. They weren't there yesterday. One symbol repeated more than the others, a circle with 5 jagged lines inside, like a mouth wide open. Or something screaming. He wiped it with his sleeve. It smeared, like wet ink, but didn't vanish. It bled instead. As if the tent itself had absorbed something it wasn't meant to hold. Nathan stepped back and noticed a pattern. All the symbols faced the lake. As if whatever wrote them, was watching from within. Panic had taken over. Nathan packed up what little he could, grabbed his gear, and headed into the woods. He marked trees, used his GPS, followed trails. But no matter how far he walked, no matter which direction he chose, he always came back. To the lake. The trees betrayed him. The compass spun randomly. The sun didn't seem to move. Each path turned in on itself. Each trail faded into mist. Time lost meaning. His legs ached. His water ran out. And still, the lake always greeted him like an old friend. Still. Cold. Patient. And in its stillness, a ripple. Just one. Like something exhaling beneath the surface. Nathan dropped to his knees. The lake had chosen him. And it wasn't finished yet. As darkness fell again, Nathan had no choice but to stay one more night by the cursed lake. Exhausted, starved, but unable to escape, he returned to the flattened grass where his tent once stood. The tent was gone. Or maybe he was simply in a different place that looked the same. When the wind died and the last traces of twilight disappeared, the water began to move again, not in waves, but in shapes. Figures emerged. Just beneath the surface. Not floating, not swimming, standing. Eyes just barely visible above the waterline, staring with unnatural stillness, as if the lake itself grew them. 5, maybe 6. It was hard to tell. No motion. No sound. Just faces without expression. One of them looked like Jared. But the skin was pale and stretched tight. His mouth was open too wide. And his eyes, pitch black, like 2 holes torn through flesh. Nathan didn't move. Didn't breathe. He simply sat there, trapped in place by a fear he had never known before, the kind that makes time crawl and your body forget it exists. The figures slowly sank back into the lake. Without a ripple. As if they had never been there. By sunrise, Nathan was spiraling into survival mode. He needed proof. Evidence. Anything that showed he was real, that this place was real. He took his pocketknife and carved a message into a thick gum tree near the lake bank. My name is Nathan. If you find this, I was here. Do not enter the lake. He stood back, took a photo with his phone, and then leaned against the trunk, trying to calm the tremble in his hands. 3 hours later, the carving was gone. The bark was smooth. Untouched. Like he had never written anything. He checked his phone. The photo was missing too. Replaced with a blurred, distorted image of water. Just water. But if he stared long enough, he swore he saw something in the reflection, a woman's face. Smiling. Upside down. At first, he thought it was the wind. A trick of the rustling reeds. But the whispers grew louder. Clearer. And they came from one direction, the lake. It was his voice. Not similar, exactly his voice. Repeating things he had never said aloud, but only thought, fears he kept buried, secrets no one knew. His voice whispered them like lullabies across the water. You left him. You should have stopped him. She knows what you did. Nathan covered his ears, but the whispers weren't in the air, they were inside him, vibrating in his bones, as if the lake was speaking through the blood in his veins. He began to forget what silence sounded like. And he feared, soon, he'd forget which voice was truly his. Later that day, as Nathan sat on the shoreline, frozen with exhaustion, he saw something drifting in the reeds. It was Jared's flashlight. Still working. Still flickering. Then his canteen. Then one of his socks. Then his notebook, drenched, the pages torn and smeared, but one sentence remained legible. I saw her. She was singing. The items didn't come all at once, just slowly, cruelly, one by one. As if the lake was returning Jared in pieces. Not his body. Just the things he had touched. And Nathan understood then, the lake didn't let you leave. But it loved to tease. To remind you of what it had taken. It always gave a little back. Before taking more. In sleep, Nathan returned to the deep. The green darkness was colder now, thicker. The pressure unbearable. But he didn't struggle this time. He drifted downward, weightless. The woman from before waited for him at the bottom. But now, she was no longer swollen or lifeless. She was beautiful. Perfect. Her eyes shone like broken glass, and her hands were warm when they touched his. She smiled, and the lake pulsed around them like a heartbeat. And for the first time, Nathan felt peace. As if this was where he was meant to be all along. When he woke, his face was damp. The same water puddled beneath his body. His fingernails were blue. And his shirt smelled like lilies. The lake wasn't just haunting him anymore. It was inviting him home. By midday, Nathan had gathered the remains of the old tent, the one with the cryptic, bleeding symbols. He didn't remember setting it up again, but there it was, standing exactly where it had been on the first night, complete with the same arrangement of ropes and pegs. The symbols were darker now, pulsing faintly in the sunlight, like they had sunk into the fabric deeper than before. One, in particular, had changed. The open-mouthed shape had split into two, like jaws unhinged. Nathan tore the tent down and piled it up with kindling. He poured the last of his lighter fluid on it, struck a match, and waited for it to blaze. The flame sparked, hissed, and died. He tried again. The flame danced for a second, then disappeared like it had been swallowed. Even the dry twigs beneath stayed untouched. No smoke. No heat. Not even a scorch mark. The fabric felt cold to the touch, unnaturally cold, like metal pulled from a freezer. Nathan realized then that it wasn't just a shelter anymore. It was part of the lake now. And it would not burn. It began slowly. Nathan would try to remember something Jared had said, and couldn't. Then he struggled to recall Jared's laugh. His voice. The shape of his nose. Whether he had freckles or not. By nightfall, Nathan couldn't picture his friend's face at all. When he opened Jared's ID card from his wallet, the photo was gone. Just a blank space where his image should be. The name was smudged, as if dragged through water. Only the lake remained clear in Nathan's mind, every ripple, every reflection, every moment. It was like the lake was replacing Jared in his memory, siphoning the identity out of him bit by bit, until soon, even the name, Jared, might sound foreign. Nathan whispered it to himself again and again, like a prayer. But it already sounded wrong. Desperate, Nathan powered up his phone and opened the GPS. He needed direction, any sign of a way out. But the display showed numbers that didn't make sense. Latitude and longitude danced erratically, switching with every second. Coordinates pointed to ocean floors, mountain ranges, and then back to a single repeating location, the lake. No matter where he walked, even if he physically turned his body in a new direction, the blue dot on the screen always centered back on that one place. Sometimes it showed no map at all, just a spinning black screen, as if the satellite feed had been swallowed by darkness. He turned on airplane mode, turned it off again, reset the system, nothing changed. It was as if the technology obeyed something else now. Something that wanted him to stay. While scavenging for dry wood, Nathan noticed the ground beneath an old eucalyptus tree had been recently disturbed. He dug with his hands until his nails split, and pulled out a rotting leather-bound book. A diary. The name inside was faint, but legible, Grace Holloway. The first date, June 3, 1974. The entries were erratic at first. Observations about camping with friends. Then, strange mentions of songs beneath the water, and a woman who hums when no one is around. The final entry was barely ink at all, more a series of smeared words and frantic symbols that matched those on Nathan's tent. One sentence stood out, written over and over until it tore the paper. The lake doesn't drown you. It remembers you. He flipped to the inside back cover and saw a drawing, the lake, the trees, and several faces drawn in the water. One of them looked like his. As dusk crept in, coloring the sky in a bruised violet hue, Nathan returned to the lakeside clearing and stopped dead. There were 2 tents. His, and another, identical, sitting 5 feet away. Same model. Same color. Same frayed zipper. But Nathan never put up a second tent. He stood frozen for minutes before daring to approach it. The flap was open, but nothing could be seen inside. No flashlight would illuminate it. His phone's camera only showed static when pointed at the opening. Then, from within the tent, came the sound of breathing. Slow. Rhythmic. Deep. Like someone, or something, was inside, asleep, or pretending to be. Nathan didn't move closer. And when he blinked, the flap had closed on its own. He backed away, slowly, until he couldn't see the tent anymore. But he knew it was still there. Waiting. At first light, Nathan packed his remaining supplies and started walking. Any direction. It didn't matter. He marked trees with sharp rocks, tore pieces of his shirt, left sticks arranged in arrows. He moved with purpose, for hours. But the lake always returned. Sometimes it appeared ahead of him, sometimes behind. One time, he found himself stepping into the shallows without realizing how he'd gotten there. The path under his feet always shifted, winding trails dissolved into reeds, fallen branches rearranged into circles, his footprints erased within minutes. The sun never moved. He could swear it hovered in the same place all day, giving no clue about the time. It was like the forest obeyed the lake, folding around it like a labyrinth with no exit. Nathan realized something far more disturbing than being lost. He hadn't heard a bird. A cricket. A single sound, in days. While rinsing his face in the lake, Nathan paused at the surface. His reflection didn't. For one terrifying moment, the mirrored version of himself remained still, staring back while he moved. Then, it began to smile, slow, wide, unnatural. Nathan staggered back, heart pounding. He returned hours later to test it again. Same result. Any time he stared too long into the water, the reflection would delay its response, and then do something he hadn't done. Smile. Blink. Tilt its head. He once turned around, thinking he saw someone standing behind him in the water. But there was no one. When he looked back, his reflection was waving. Scrolling through his phone, Nathan discovered an audio file he didn't recognize. It was labeled Jared_voice_07. His fingers trembled as he hit play. Jared's voice echoed through the speakers, panicked, whispering fast. If you found this, I didn't make it. She's not dead. Don't listen to the singing. Don't sleep near the water. She feeds when you dream. Nathan, run. She likes you. Nathan froze. The timestamp showed the file had been created in May 2023, nearly 2 years ago. But he and Jared had only arrived this week. The voice repeated 3 times. Each time, it ended with static, but the last playthrough included something new. A second voice layered underneath Jared's, faint, melodic, almost loving. A woman humming a lullaby. As he stripped off his shirt to wash at a shallow stream, Nathan saw something strange on his forearms, thin, almost surgical scars running in patterns down to his wrists. Symbols. The same ones from the tent. He stared, heart racing. They were too precise to be accidental. Too clean to be new. But he didn't remember them. Had they always been there? The longer he stared, the more the scars itched, burned. By nightfall, they started to glow, faintly, like lines drawn in moonlight. He covered them with bandages, but the bandages were soaked with cold water by morning. Even though he hadn't gone near the lake. Just past midnight, Nathan woke to the sound of splashing. At first, he thought it was wind, or maybe the strange tent again, but then he heard it. Jared's voice. Muffled. Desperate. Calling his name. Nathan, please. I'm here. I'm under. Pull me out. I see you, Nathan, I'm still me, please. Nathan stood at the lake's edge, breath fogging in the night air. The water was calm. No ripples. No sign of life. But the voice kept coming. As if carried on the current, rising from deep below the surface. And then, something tapped his ankle from beneath. Just once. Then again. Softly. Like fingers. He ran. Didn't stop until he reached the far edge of the forest. But somehow, when he caught his breath and looked around, the lake was still right in front of him. During another desperate attempt to navigate the forest, Nathan stumbled upon a large, dead tree standing unnaturally still among the swaying eucalyptus. Something was nailed to its bark, a photograph, aged and weather-worn, its edges curled and faded from rain and sun. He stepped closer. The photo showed a group of 5 people standing beside the lake, smiling. Camping gear in the background. A small fire pit. The old tents. It looked like the same campsite, only decades earlier. At the center of the photo, unmistakable even through the sepia tone, stood Nathan. Younger. Maybe in his early 20s. Same eyes. Same scar on his eyebrow. But he'd never been here before this week. He turned the photo over. Faint handwriting read, March 12, 1981, Holloway Campground. His stomach twisted. He was born in 1994. As he returned to his tent, Nathan noticed his bag wasn't where he'd left it. When he finally found it near the base of a moss-covered tree, the zippers were rusted. The fabric looked worn and patched, like it had been abandoned for years. Inside, his supplies had changed. His modern flashlight was now a bulky, rusted torch from the 70s. His phone was gone, replaced by a cracked walkie-talkie with dead batteries. Even his clothes seemed faded, seams thinning like they had been washed too many times. Everything was aging, deteriorating, except him. It was as if time around the lake followed different rules. Rules that didn't care about logic, or physics, or sanity. Nathan's heart raced when he saw the label on his jacket's inner tag. It read, Property of N. Graves, Holloway Expedition 1981. He had never owned that jacket. Until now. That night, Nathan couldn't stay awake. The forest itself seemed to press down on him like a heavy blanket. When he finally closed his eyes, the dreams came fast, vivid, violent, unshakable. He was a soldier on a beach during wartime, dragging bodies from the surf. Then, a lighthouse keeper, watching a woman walk into the sea night after night. Then, a fisherman in 1920s Tasmania, hearing voices echo from beneath the waves. Each dream ended the same, standing at the edge of a lake, moonlight bending wrong across the water, and a hand reaching up from the blackness to pull him in. He woke with wet sand on his fingertips. And a new scar across his chest. When he returned to the eucalyptus tree, Nathan found the leather-bound diary he'd uncovered days ago, now with another one beside it. Identical in size and shape, but newer. His name was written on the first page, Nathan Graves, Lake Entry Log. Page after page, filled with entries written in his handwriting, dates he didn't remember, events he hadn't lived. Some entries described his current situation with terrifying accuracy. Others spoke of moments he hadn't yet experienced. One entry was dated tomorrow. It described finding Jared's body floating face up, eyes gone, mouth full of lake water. Nathan slammed the book shut, breathing fast. He hadn't found any body yet. But that meant it could still happen. And it already had, just not in this version of his life. At twilight, Nathan returned to the lakeshore one last time. Something in him felt pulled, as if a string was tied to his spine, being reeled in slowly by the water. That's when he saw her. A woman standing ankle-deep in the lake, wearing a long dress soaked in shadow. Her hair hung like seaweed, black and tangled. Her face was pale, serene, but wrong. Unmoving. She stared directly at him. But the water around her didn't move. No ripples. No disturbance. Like she wasn't really there, or like the lake had preserved her image like a memory stuck on repeat. Nathan tried to step back. She lifted one hand slowly and pointed behind him. He turned around quickly, but nothing was there. When he looked back at the lake, she was gone. Only the silence remained. And a fresh footprint appeared beside his. Still wet. The next morning, Nathan noticed crows circling above the shoreline. As he approached, a chilling sight came into view, a line of dead animals, their bodies bloated and half buried in the mud. Fish with empty eyes. Possums waterlogged and stiff. Even a kangaroo calf, barely decomposed. All pointing in the same direction. Toward a crevice at the far end of the lake, partially hidden beneath overgrown vines. A natural cave, half submerged. The water at its mouth shimmered unnaturally, as if deeper than the lake itself. Something about it felt wrong. The air turned cold. The forest, once still and eerie, seemed to hold its breath. As he stood before the cave, Nathan felt a force pulling at his ribs, like something ancient had marked him. Like it was calling him home. Compelled to enter, Nathan waded through the freezing water, flashlight shaking in his grip. The cave's interior twisted inward, deeper than should have been geologically possible. Then he found it. A stone wall carved with dozens of human faces, some distorted in screams, others tranquil in death. But one detail stopped his heart cold. One face was his. Not similar. Identical. Eyes open, mouth shut, half submerged in algae and rot. Beneath each face were symbols, the same ones carved on his arms. Some faces had dates etched below them. His had none. Yet. He stepped back, nearly slipping. His light caught something scrawled on the ceiling above. She remembers them all. She keeps what time forgets. Near the shrine wall, floating in a shallow pool beneath the stone, was something that looked like clothing. Nathan leaned closer and saw the unmistakable print of Jared's hoodie. He stepped into the water, hands trembling. As he pulled the fabric toward him, the body followed, pale, eyes gone, skin loose and rubbery. Jared. His friend's mouth was stretched unnaturally wide, stuffed with lake reeds and sharp black stones. Symbols were carved into his chest, identical to those on Nathan's arms. Nathan stumbled back, vomiting. Then, as if disturbed, Jared's body twitched. Not from life, but from something moving underneath the water. Something big. Something rising. Panicked, Nathan fled the cave, crawling into daylight, lungs aching and skin ice-cold. But the lake no longer looked the same. It was expanding. The forest had shifted. The trees were now gone, replaced with endless water. No shoreline. Just a black mirror stretching into forever. And reflected in its center was not the sky, but a face. Hers. The woman from before. But this time, her eyes were open. Watching. Smiling with something deeper than malice, something like recognition. He screamed, turned, and ran. But there was nowhere to go. Because the forest was gone. The episode ends at dusk. The camera pans across the now empty campsite. Nathan's tent sits abandoned. His gear rots in the dirt. His footprints lead into the lake, but not back out. The water is still. Then, just as the last light of day fades, something ripples in the surface, and the camera catches a reflection. A new figure standing at the tree lean, backpack slung over his shoulder. Someone new has arrived. And beneath the surface, just faint enough to miss. Nathan's face is watching him from below, eyes open, lips mouthing a warning. But no sound comes out. Only the gentle hum of a woman's lullaby echoing from deep in the cave. That was our story for tonight. Do you think it's just an ordinary tale, or is there something more to it? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss the next stories. See you, if you still dare to watch next time.